So for the future, if we want to have someone hosted on a Zoom account or another account where you have that ability, that's something to consider. Unfortunately, we don't, but we can share our materials from today. And if anyone who missed this would like to talk with us, we would really love to go ahead and set up a check-in so we can walk through it with anyone that missed today. I hope that answers that question. And then maybe we can introduce ourselves as we go. I feel like I kind of recognize most folks, but would it be helpful to do right at the start, or do we want to do it as we go? What do you think? See Deb's hand as a thumbs up. Is it for right now or for later as we go? Now, okay. So I'm Rita. I'm actually now the acting deputy executive for the government and community relations team. Still supporting this project, and I've got Phoebe, Jason, Kent, Cecilia, and Steve here with me. So I'm going to go to Jason first, and then we definitely want to go around and we hear from Ken, Marilyn, Joe, Nathan, and so forth. But Phoebe, go ahead.
So, hi, Phoebe Wu, she, her pronouns. So with Sound Transit, I'm a Senior Engagement Specialist, Primary Support West Seattle Link Extension, mostly community engagement and property owners engagement as well. I think Jason's
Seems
next.
like you're quickest to go to. Jason, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm Jason Hampton. I'm Development Manager working in our planning group. And my role in the project is a segment manager for the West Seattle Link Extension, which includes the portions of the project from SoDo, west across the Duwamish, and of course in West Seattle.
Let's go to Cecilia and then Kent.
Hey everybody, it's Cecilia again. I support Phoebe and Lita with outreach in the West Seattle neighborhood and the West Seattle Link Extension. So good to see everybody.
Kent?
Hi, yes, I'm Kent Melton. I'm a consultant project manager in the Real Property Division at Sound Transit.
And Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Jones, a consultant right-of-way agent, and I'm tasked with acquiring right-of-entries for the project.
We thought he might be handy to have here for folks who might have questions.
Sorry if I can interrupt. Would you mind to elaborate what you're contracting on?
Well, I'm a consultant in the Real Property Division. The firm I work for is called Contract Land Staff, and we consult with Sound Transit in their right-of-way division. And I'm basically a project manager. Sound Transit has a project manager, Rhonda Thompson, who has a conflict today, and so I basically work alongside her to manage the project, the real estate part of the project. Okay.
Okay, let's go to Joe, and then Nathan, and then Marilyn. Go ahead, Joe.
Hi there, I'm Joe Bungard-Zagrodnik. I live on 32nd Ave, sort of very adjacent to the preferred alternative, so part of this Avalon group.
Good to see you, Joe. Nathan?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nathan. I live on Andover, right next to... Yes, Andover. I've lived here for 4 years, and I still get Andover and Avalon confused. I live on Andover, right next to Transitional Resources.
Is it Andover or Yancey, right? It's the same street depending on what side you're on.
Marilyn, I think you're up
Okay, let's go from, Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Marilyn. I live on 32nd.
Thank you. And then Devin and Kim.
First.
There you go. Oh, wait, you had it. You were unmuted for a second. Try it again.
Good thing I needed that curse word. Deb Barker, Chris only in mute, and former member of Sound Transit, SAG and CAG, and interested West Seattle person. I feel like it's been a while since we all met. I can't even remember my title. But I'll ask lots of questions.
Yeah. Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Schwarzkopf. I've lived here for 27 years on Avalon, and I'm a mom. I've got two sons, 19 and 22 years old. I was on the Sound Transit CAG as well, the Community Advisory Group, and I've also been on the Delridge Neighborhoods Development Association for 1 year. Happy to be here.
Great to see you all, and I appreciate you being here. 4 o'clock on Monday in August. So we're going to start with updates. I'm going to keep watching the chat. We've got a small group here, so definitely want space for a dialogue, but also hoping a lot of what we share is kind of what you've been looking for, or at least helpful in understanding kind of what we do have today versus what we might have in the future. Does someone mind sharing screen? Okay. There it is. Okay. So as I mentioned, just quick updates on where we're at. We'll talk field work. And then we'll also talk about, I forgot about this, upcoming engagement. We've been hearing ideas. Last time when we talked with you, we talked about how we would be looking at doing engagement this fall. And so we wanted to share some updates on that and gather some feedback from you, if that feels okay. And then, any additional Q&A that we have. So next. I think that this isn't new to folks, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I think that the key things are just remembering that we're still looking to try to start service for West Seattle in 2032, and that for our planning phase, we are looking at publishing, we hope, a final EIS in 2024, and we're still in that planning phase. Design starts in 2024. After that, final EIS and project to be built selection, and then construction in 2027. Okay, next slide.
So at this point, the last time we met, you said sort of middle 2024. Now you're just saying 2024. Could it be any point in 2024 now?
Oh, no, that's a great question. It definitely is not going to be the first quarter of 2024. I'm still, I think we're still, Jason, thinking mid is probably like the earliest we could say, or the most specific we could get.
but it plausibly could be Q4.
It could. Jason, do you have any?
I hope not. I mean, that's certainly not what we're aiming for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're aiming to get it out probably middle of the year.
Middle of 2024.
Somewhere in that time frame. No earlier than that.
All right.
And hopefully not later, but we'll see.
So we will stay in the EIS or DEIS until that time.
We will publish the final EIS at that time. So we'll still be in the environmental review process then.
Okay.
We'll publish the final,
Can we still comment during this period of time? From now until when you do the final EIS, are we going to have a chance to interact and comment and have some meetings, some back and forth dialogue?
Yeah, so that's that third topic I mentioned, the upcoming engagement. That's exactly what we're going to talk about, is doing engagement.
Are our comments, if we write into you, are they read? Can we have ongoing comment, not just, once every 4 months or something? We need to be able to ask questions and make comments, not at just one little meeting at, once every 3 months.
Okay, I hear you on that, and we're going to talk about that as a big topic. So let's make sure that we touch back on that and dig into it a bit more, Meryl.
Absolutely.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't think we need to spend a ton on this because I'm going to hand it over to to Jason to talk about what we're studying and what we're looking at. But I think you all know that back in July of 2022, the board identified preferred alternatives and other alternatives to study for the final EIS. We also did some of that further study work and have incorporated those refinements as well. And are working towards that final environmental impact statement. At every step, we've had these comment periods and so forth, and so we're going to get to talk about our next engagement period a little bit later. Okay, next slide. I think we talked about this last time, but essentially the idea being that the Ballard and West Seattle link extensions were studied together in a draft EIS that was published in 2022, early 2022, but because the Ballard link extension has components of it that needed further study before they identified the preferred alternative, the Ballard link extension is now kind of proceeding on its own timeline, and West Seattle link extension is going straight to a final EIS. So what you're going to see when we do publish this document, this final EIS, is going to be West Seattle focused.
So we might have components that need further study. That's my big worry, that it's going to go into the final EIS, and we need that opportunity that Ballard has to have further study.
Yep. Again, I think this is a bigger topic, and I'm going to have to try to explain where we are, but essentially we are in the final EIS right now. So we had a draft EIS comment period. We had an alternatives development process that gathered feedback all the way. Then we published a draft EIS. We gathered feedback there. Based on that, the board told us what the preferred alternatives are, and they asked for some further study at that point in time, but they identified a preferred alternative already. So we are moving forward into a final EIS based on the board direction, and then we will publish the final EIS. There isn't, in the process, there's opportunities for engagement, and of course, at any point in time, you can say, we'd like to see you look at these things, but in terms of the formal process, our next milestone for the project is a final EIS. But further study period means delay for the project for Ballard. I'm just talking about Ballard now. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Marilyn, like, I completely agree with you. We lobbied the board to convince them to extend it for West Seattle in the same way that they did for Ballard. Unfortunately, we failed, and that's, at this point, it's just kind of done. As much as we want to have an extension of study, that's not Sound Transit's decision at this point.
They say final, but they still have to vote again after that. So in reality, they can still call an audible again.
Those are both true statements. So yeah, thank you.
As much as it's miserable for all of you if they change their mind again, but so it goes.
Oh, it does.
Hey, whatever they tell us to do. I mean, they're elected and they're our board. But just as you mentioned, it's not within our ability to go beyond what they've directed us to do. So that's kind of the place we are. Okay. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to hand it to Jason here, I think, right, Jason, for you to just talk about kind of
Lita,
some updated
before
graphics that we have. Yeah.
Did you see that Kim had a good question about when the FEIS is published? When the FEIS is published, will we have another chance to comment, was Kim's question in the chat.
It is part of a public process, so of course our board is going to be in the boardroom taking action on a project to be built. This is something I just need to follow up on. I mean, we have on this project tended towards layering in as much engagement as possible. And I believe, if I recall, the final EIS it's not the same as the draft EIS in terms of the parameters around an official comment period. But we know that our board members are going to want to know how people feel about what they see in that final EIS. And so let's just keep talking about how we make sure that we've got some kind of process that allows our board to hear your voices as they're making that project to be built decision, even if it isn't kind of governed by the typical environmental process. And Deb, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that either, just given all your experience with EISs and such, but.
I think there'll be comments. It's whether or not anything substantive could change. It seems Herculean to think that it possibly could, but you've got a whole bunch of potential new people on the Sound Transit Board, and no one knows.
That's a great point too, Deb. We've got to be working with them to get them up to speed, and I'm sure they're going to be interested in what the public has to say.
Yeah,
so,
it's going to be a whole new world come January. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, Jason, go ahead. Over to you.
Thanks. I'm going to go through these next couple of slides pretty quick because we've covered many of them, but I think this is a great slide to kind of back up Joe's comment about the board decision after the final EIS. So in addition to the preferred alternative that's included in the final EIS and was identified by the board, we're going to continue to study all of the other alternatives that were in the draft EIS and an additional alternative that wasn't in the draft EIS, which is an option to potentially save costs by eliminating the Avalon station. All of those other alternatives, including the eliminated Avalon, are shown here in the blue lines. I'm going to give a little bit more overview of the preferred alternative and then that eliminated Avalon option on the next two slides. And just want to note, we do have some other maps that I'm going to show after these, and we've kind of broadened the field. I know that there was some comments about showing Delridge and the Avalon neighborhood all in one map, so we've done that. But these are the older maps that we used to describe the further study. So when the board identified alternatives for the final EIS, they asked us to incorporate the further study alignment into the final EIS. And that's shown here at the top right. You can see the Delridge station. There's two orange boxes. One connects to a blue line, which is the draft EIS alternative that was often referred to as Del 6, also known as the Andover Street lower height alternative. And one of the goals was to improve passenger access and transit integration and to reduce effects to organizations serving low-income and communities of color. That was really focused at transitional resources. And we were able to kind of achieve those outcomes by shifting the station a little bit further south. So now the alignment connects, or the station connects to the green alignment, where it follows the north side of Yancey as it continues west before curving southwest, and then a little bit further south on the west side of 32nd, it connects back with that draft EIS alignment. This would also have a lower height guideway and station, which would lead to a permanent closure of 32nd Avenue. So that would have cul-de-sacs from both ends, and we're continuing to work out those designs. It does eliminate the potential passenger and freight conflicts.
Are you continuing to research both the blue and the green, or from now on, is it only the green?
Both alternatives are in the final EIS.
Jason, I think you said to me the other day that the green is you're starting to a higher level than the blue, right? For just because that's the preferred alternative, right?
Yeah.
But you're still prepared if there's a board decision to be able to switch later.
Yes, and so the final EIS will include the same level of design for all alternatives. We take it to about a 10% conceptual level of design, and that allows us to do an even comparison between all of those alternatives in the final EIS. Outside of that EIS process, we do advance preliminary engineering, we call it, so to about 30% design on the preferred alternatives.
Okay, preliminary engineering after,
with the rigorous.
I always
pace
forget
to be
that
able to
term.
try to keep the schedule. Yes, preliminary engineering.
Okay, so just a couple of final points, and I think I've made these before, but we're working on a concept to eliminate the passenger and freight conflicts. So really looking at new access for new core and separating the people accessing the station by bus and walking from that freight access. And then this does have a reduced impact on transitional resources. but there are other residential impacts from this. But overall, it's 14 fewer residential impacts, but 3 additional businesses there at Andover and Avalon.
So how many residential impacts will there be? 14 fewer, but how many altogether?
So we're still doing the final analysis for the final EIS, but that estimate was based on our early further study work to provide the board with some information on the further study that they requested of us. So this number could slightly change as we do it, but this is 14 fewer than what was in the draft EIS for the Del 6 alternative.
Right. How many were in the draft EIS? That's minus 14. So how many residences? I mean, the number we had heard is 1,400 possible businesses, residences. So
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I can easily pull it up for you. When we looked at this segment, we looked at Delridge and the West Seattle Junction segments together. So typically we break down the EIS analysis into different segments, but because the project impacts were very dependent on whether we were connecting to elevated in the junction versus tunnel in the junction, we looked at those displacements together, and that I just can't recall off the top of my head. Maybe when we move on, I can pull that up.
Great.
Thank you. Deb has her hands up for a while.
Yeah, just real quick, Jason, I apologize to ask dumb questions, but the green line was the preferred alignment, which was pink on your other page, correct?
The blue line here?
No.
Yeah, the green line is the preferred alignment for the FEIS, yeah.
Okay, so just want to clarify where you have the permanent closure of 32nd Avenue pointing at the green line along with the 14 fewer residents, and those are impacts only from the green line, which is the preferred alignment, or are they impacts from both the green and the blue lines? Does that make sense in that question?
Yeah, those are when comparing the green line to the blue line. So these boxes are for the green line, the preferred.
Okay. So another way of saying that then is the blue line, which is not the preferred alignment, would not result in the closure of 32nd Avenue?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, so then this map here, similar to the last map, we show the blue preferred alternative in the West Seattle Junction segment, along with the eliminated Avalon station option. And I think one of the things that we pointed out before is rather than follow the same alignment as the project, but just not build the Avalon station, as we looked at this with the planning team and the design team, they came up with a scenario which would be a more optimized alignment. So rather than going on the east side of the West Seattle Bridge, they would continue in a tunnel under the West Seattle Bridge, connection to Fauntleroy, continuing to the west and curving to the south, still with a station under 41st at Southwest Alaska Street. This would reduce the temporary and permanent roadway closures, so some of those closures over by 35th, and it would yield 48 fewer residential and 3 fewer business displacements than the alternative with a station at Andover. It would be longer travel times for passengers who are living or accessing the station closer to Avalon, so they'd have to walk a little bit further or take buses a little bit further to get to the either Alaska or Delridge station. But we wouldn't expect a decrease in project ridership. And then this would have a potential cost savings of about $80 million. And so this is included in the final EIS as an alternative as well. And this connects to the alignment that's on the north side of Yancey. So it includes those refinements at the station to improve passenger connections. Next slide, please.
Deb, did you still have a question, by the way? Because your hand's still up.
Thumbs down. I think no question. Okay, so this map is looking at the area with Avalon Way on the right-hand side to the east. North is up, of course, and it connects it to the West Seattle Junction segment. This is the draft DIS Del 6 alignment, where the alignment went through the property just to the west of Avalon at Transitional Resources, and then was elevated over Andover Street and 32nd before entering a retained cut as it continued south along the east side of the West Seattle Bridge connection to Fauntleroy Way. Next slide, please. So as we're working to advance the design, we're looking at an alignment here that would include the refinements. So that station shifted south, and then the new alignment with a lower height and the closure of 32nd there. You can see we would be elevated over Avalon Way, and it would continue elevated, and it would cross 32nd at grade before entering a retained cut, kind of following a similar alignment as the DEIS Del 6 alternative. So as we continue to advance this, we're looking at fieldwork and other activities to gain a better understanding of the existing condition. That's one of the things I'll talk about in a moment. I know that we got some questions about that in emails. And the next slide.
Sorry, if I can just quickly ask you about this slide.
Yeah.
I know this is very much a draft, like the does not show exactly where the route will be. But just a question that a couple of us have discussed is, from where the line is, what is the width of property that would be claimed? Like if it's sort of cutting the corner of where a property is now, how could we estimate of which properties are going to be purchased and which ones won't?
So it's very much site specific and has a lot to do with everything from existing grades and topography and roadways and what they would need to build the alignment. So in this situation, we would have tracks in both directions, but there's not a station nearby, so we wouldn't have the big station elements that you'd expect there, or the traction power substations. There's no at-grade crossings, so we wouldn't need things like signal bungalows for those crossing signals and things. So we'd really be constructing, 2 tracks, one in each direction, and then the appropriate security and noise attenuation where necessary. But it is very site-specific, and it really also depends on what we need to build it. And those are details that'll be worked out as we advance preliminary engineering and design, and also get a better understanding of existing conditions such as actual survey rather than GIS mapping and things like that.
Hey, Jason, do you have an approximation of how wide the track, that double track alignment is in feet? Do you know, assuming there's no other add-ons, just like if it's just 2 tracks and then it's on an elevated segment, for instance?
60?
No, I would think it's closer to 30, but it depends on the layout for the, there's overhead catenary system poles that need to go in between the guideways, and then there's, separation between, depending on how we would build noise walls and things like that. So that's, it's all worked out, but in general, I would say closer to that.
Yeah, it's like the width of a road, probably. Okay, that makes sense.
And Kim, I see your questions in the chat. I'm hoping that folks are voicing those same questions and that Jason's answering those for you.
I'm not seeing the chat, so.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Jason, I think one just additional question it looks like Kim had was 30 feet in width, and how wide is the road? So how is like the 2 tracks compared to the width of the road?
Well, and road
It really depends on what kind of road.
road classifications differ depending on if it's an arterial, a minor arterial, a residential street. So road widths or road right-of-ways aren't one size usually.
Yeah. All right, Jason, do you want to speak to this slide?
Yeah, I'll just speak to this quickly. So this is the Andover Street Station Lower Height alternative with the eliminated Avalon option. And so with this option, we would continue west out of the Delridge station on an elevated guideway. You can see that white and green hatch where we're elevated over Avalon Way and Andover. And then just at the east side of the West Seattle Bridge connection to Fauntleroy, we would enter into a tunnel, and we would tunnel continuing west under the West Seattle Bridge, and then curve to the south. On the bigger map, you could see it into the Alaska Junction station under 41st. And we're still bringing this up to the level of the design that was in all of the alternatives and DEIs, so the FEIS level design, about 10%. And we'll have more information on this in the final EIS as far as the potential property impacts. And as I mentioned before, the initial numbers that we shared on that first slide were really compared to the DEIS, and they were at a very, initial conceptual level. Sorry, go ahead. I heard somebody unmute. Yeah.
I didn't hear that. No.
So a little bit about fieldwork. I know some folks had reached out. They'd received some requests for rights of entry, and just a little bit more background on that on the next slide. So throughout project development, we've been doing investigations throughout the project area. We're looking at information to help plan and design the light rail alignments. And this is all part of the environmental review process, but also helping to inform that preliminary engineering I was talking about. The next slide highlights some of the types of field work that we're doing. So those highlighted in blue are some of the things that we've reached out to some folks. Some of you may have received the request. So civil survey, trying to really get a good understanding of the actual site conditions, so property lines, elevations, things like that. Locating utilities. So we have a lot of utility information, but in order to get an even better picture of what's below the ground, it helps us to get out there, both in roadways and sometimes on private properties. Tree analysis, so doing a thorough inventory of all of the trees in the project area. And then a phase 1 environmental site assessment. And this is something where we meet with a property owner, and we have kind of ask some questions about historic use of the property. So, for example, if it's an office building, we'd ask what types of uses or businesses were in there in the past to try to better understand if there's going to be some contamination. And if there is contamination and we need that property for the project, we'd later need to do a phase 2 to do a little bit more invasive and really understand what's going on below ground. We've also done some noise and vibration monitoring, and we'll continue to do that. I think we've done that at some of your properties. Wetland and stream delineation, so really a little bit further east of you, just really understanding where Longfellow Creek is, the actual stream channel, wetlands in the area, doing biological assessments, also doing geotechnical drilling, so to really understand what the soil conditions are throughout the project corridor. And then a historic building inventory is being conducted as well for the entire project area. Next slide, please. So I don't know if before we move on to the engagement, I don't know if we had questions that we wanted to discuss about the field work and the rights of entry. We have Steve here, is very involved with our team and helping work with those.
It doesn't look like it right now, but if questions do come up.
Well, I have a question. How many
Yes, go ahead.
how many homes or how many people have gotten letters? How many letters have you sent out?
I don't know if we have the number. We're doing this all up and down the project corridor. Team, you don't have.
Yeah,
that number.
I mean, right now, yeah, you're right, Lita. It's project wide, right? So we don't have, we haven't sectioned it out. I think there's a little over 200 letters out for requests right now.
For
Or
just
there will be in the near future. Yeah.
for Del
And
6
for
and
those four, I'm sorry.
for for Del 6 and WSJ 5, there are how many?
For the whole West Seattle link extension, so not just about West Seattle, like from Soto to West Seattle. Is that right, Ken?
Yes, yeah, we're working some in Soto.
So how many total?
And West Seattle.
And Ken, if you're contacting property owners, and are you contacting occupants or only property owners? And what happens if you don't hear from a property owner? What are your next steps to try and engage?
Well, we try to contact the property owners because that's the main thing we're trying to. That's who we're trying to get the right of entry from, is permission from the property owner. And we'll try doing that a number of times. Maybe first by mail, the next try a phone call, email. All the ways you try to contact people these days. If there is no contact and we can't find someone, typically we just write that down as non-responsive and move on.
And if you have condominiums, you're contacting each individual property owner?
It depends on the activity. If we don't need into the specific condos themselves and just need to be on the condominium grounds, it would probably be the condominium association that's contacted.
All right.
But if we have to get into an individual one, would contact the owner. Yes.
Thank you.
Do you guys have a timeline on when you plan to wrap up these activities, or is like rest of this year into next year for these type of studies?
I haven't seen a timeline. We're just kind of working along as we can get them. I'm not sure with the. Well, we give these to the design team, so I don't know. At some point, they may tell us that we've gotten enough. So we're just in contact with them mostly. I thought I saw a question on there. It's around. This effort will be around 200 right now that we have we are out there trying to get rights of entry, and like we said, that's from Soto all the way through the end of the West Seattle project.
Awesome, thank you. I have to go pick up my kids, so thanks all of you for being on again. I'll let the rest of the group report. Bye bye.
Any other questions on this? I see 3 little dots, so I just want to make sure. So the design team, Kim's question is, who is on the design team, or how many people, and who is the lead? Jason, would it be fair to say you're essentially leading all the different disciplines and pulling them together? But I don't know if there's more you want to add to that to answer Kim's question.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. But I mean, it is a very broad and diverse team as far as skills and expertise, and we have a design team that's made up of both Sound Transit employees who are really kind of charged with managing the work, and then we have a consultant designer in our contracts with a large engineering firm called HNTB, and they are working on this project through project development phase.
Jason, we work pretty hand in hand with them, so it's not kind of one of those things where they go off and do something and then we see it later. Kind of like expanding our team, but there's an accountability factor for us.
It's like one big team.
One more question, and I will totally raise my hand. And going back to got your name. Anyway, rights of entry letters, are those public record?
Well, I mean, they go ahead, Lita. Did you answer that?
No, I mean, most things we do are
Yeah.
Right. I figured they were.
We're a public agency.
And it's only really because the Avalon group is very focused, particularly in this, this Avalon area. I know that you were with your 200 letters dealing with the Sodo area all the way through to West Seattle. There's probably a lot of letters that we really don't care about. That's just the way it is. So we were curious if requesting the parcel numbers of the properties that you are sending letters to in West Seattle for rights of access or rights of entry, is that something that's you're interested in sharing with us, or is that something that we'd have to do a request for public record?
I think that just because we're honestly on this call probably not sure, what are the things we need to be requested for, it might just make it easier to have you just send us a note with your request, and then we can.
Fair enough. That sounds great.
Yeah, and it doesn't upset us sometimes to do that, but I think it would help our team with not having to figure out what's appropriate to share and not share.
I know. And just for the new consultants, we understand that you have a very large area of focus, and typically our focus is much narrower. At least West Seattle based. Everything else is gravy.
Yeah. Thank you. And yes, Johannes, I know you had asked this question before, and I feel like I even had a conversation with folks about the work we were doing to track this down, but maybe Jason recalls. So the question is, with West Seattle Link Extension not getting connected to the, I think it's the one line initially. It's actually going to be, I think, the 3 line, right, Jason? The West Seattle Link Extension will become the 3 line. Anyway, but connecting into downtown, into the existing tunnel, and having to operate as an independent line, how are we seeking to train cars, storage, and maintenance in the FEIS?
Remember.
Yeah. Well, Jason, would it be fair to say we've got an OMF there in Sodo, and they will be able to connect into to West Seattle from that OMF. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we'll be able to connect in with the operations maintenance facility, and that'll provide a connection to the 1 line, and by then the 3 line will be operating as well. We'll have the operations and maintenance facility in Bellevue connected.
Yeah, and I know that you have some specific questions too, and I can't recall them at this moment, and I know the team was trying to figure out they were more global almost in terms of headways and that kind of thing. But was that helpful to you, Jonas, at least about this question? Okay, great. All right, so maybe we'll turn to upcoming engagements in our last 10 minutes. So I have one very simple slide here, and then I think I'm just going to say, let's take the slide deck down. So while Jason talked about all the work the team is doing to be responsive to the comments that we received on the draft EIS, the feedback we've gotten since then in preparing this final EIS document, we're also doing further design work on the preferred alternative. And part of that gives us some design ideas we'd like to share with the public. And we'd like to do that in a way that's done before the final EIS is published and informs some of our work. And that's really focused in around the stations in particular. There are some other key topics we know that have come up and down the corridor that people have had particular questions or interest in. And so we're trying to see what will be prepared and available that fits in with this conversation about these stations. So if folks remember, in each phase, we've essentially had opportunities where we dig in around access, station configuration, what it's going to feel like at the station when we think about other features like transit-oriented development, as well as multimodal access and where entrances will be located. There's a lot of pieces of that we know that communities are going to be interfacing with these stations, and we'd like these stations also to interface in a way that supports the community and is part of that vision for the future of the community. And so we are looking at this fall having a couple of public meeting events with the public. So, imagine the first stop is here is where we are, here is some table setting on the process, and also here's some initial look at what the preferred alternative stations could look like. And then we're going to be gathering feedback. And then we'll be coming back with a second meeting that would be, okay, like, let's report back, hearing from the feedback, here's what that means. That's just broad strokes what we're thinking about in terms of public meetings. To Kim's questions, it is very focused around the stations. There's a lot of deep, important design work that needs to happen around the stations. But we do also know there's been a lot of other topics that people are particularly interested in. And so one thing that we are working on as well is either having folks be available or actually having something if we're ready. And of course, recognizing we're still producing a final EIS and a lot of things are still in progress. But we want to have this touch point with the community where we're sharing what we do have available. We're trying to really do some work, some legwork on these stations. And then on key topics, and I'd love to hear those key topics that matter to you all, that we'd at least have people either available, or if we have something new to share, we could have that available at these meetings as well. So that we're essentially doing engagement around the stations, but there's a wraparound element that speaks to what the community's been really interested in trying to understand. There's going to be a lot of stuff where, honestly, we'll still be in process, but we can also tell people that's still in process. So we're having this space to connect with folks, and these would be for everyone to attend, so there would be public meetings. Deb, I see your hand up.
I have some feedback.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I have two key comments. One, I really like your phrase, what's it going to feel like? And that's a good thing to put out there for people to start thinking about how things feel. There's look and touch and all of that, auditory, that's senses. I think it's important that Sound Transit focus on, of course, you're talking about on the system, if you're a user of the system. So whether that, and we were talking station areas, so that's, of course, that station area. But I also think it's very important that when you're asking that question, that you get request information from the non-users. Someone who's across the street, who's going by. You don't want to, I think you need to pay attention to the non-users, at least for that day, if you will, and then the users. So I like the idea of asking what it's saying. We're going to help, let's figure out what it's going to feel like, but make sure you include what that would be for the non-users as well as the users. My other comment, and this, I think I feel like a broken record because I keep saying this and I know it doesn't happen, but I really hope you can figure out a way to make it happen, is your maps still show the segments, this segment, and the impact is somewhere in that line area. And try, do, whatever. How are you going to figure out how you quantify those impacts so people don't have to look at 3 different pages to see what the heck is going on? I know it's something that, because you're segment oriented, you're not fully able to do one drawing, but try to do something where you can show one segment going into the other. And what I mean mostly is from Avalon west to 35th. Does that make sense? Just have one map.
No, I appreciate that, and I know we've heard
or even
that.
just have like a larger overlap. And I think particularly the example that Deb just gave, every map we've seen actually changes the orientation between Del 6 and WSJ. So I think that it would be helpful if they were the same orientation as well.
Okay, so those are my 2 comments right now.
This is helpful early feedback.
I want to I just want to say, +1 to what you said, Deb, and better maps that are all on one page if that is possible, or at least showing more of it in those transition points, and especially that I would say from Delridge to the junction. Yeah, so we need it all the way from that Delridge station through Youngstown, through Avalon to the junction.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks. Is there any other thoughts? And we want to ensure that you all feel like that the Avalon community can engage in this process and feel good about it. If there's anything as we get closer to and we have more of a sense of what the events, we're still in the early planning phase, are going to look like. Certainly if there's ideas you have about what would be helpful wraparound engagement or support to just get, either Avalon folks there, or if there may be helpful ways to get the word out about them, or even have time to have follow-up questions. So my sense is we'll be gathering thoughts and feedback over the course of the fall, not just in one instance, as Miriam was saying. I will note, just for the technical team, this is always a tricky thing. They kind of got to have time to do some work. And so it can be a little bit tricky. There's no way that they can be, having a meeting every week, for example, right? They've got to collect all the feedback, think about what to do with it, and see how they can incorporate it. And that just ends up being kind of a step process. But go ahead, Nathan.
We only have 3 minutes. I wanted to ask
sorry.
a question that was separate to this, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
One of the topics we bring up a lot is the idea of having the tunnel portal at Yancey and Avalon. Is that going to be presented at the public meetings? Is that going to be in the FEIS? And the reason why I bring this up is because it would have a massive impact on the design of the station, because the rail would be so much lower. And for us, we would really want to see the community to see that as an alternative, and the board members to see that as an alternative. And if it's just we may consider this if the drop Avalon station option is removed, that's kind of not presenting the real information.
Okay.
Yeah, well, so, and maybe Jason, do you want to add on to this after I speak to it? So this is pretty focused, I think, on the preferred alternative. That's where we're really advancing that design with preliminary engineering. We're not doing that for all of the alternatives in the final environmental impact statement. It doesn't mean the board can't, again, project to be built. I think there's been many a time where they've had differences and changes at that point in time in some way. I don't know about that to this extent or not, and I couldn't speak for them. So they could tell us at that time. We do have multiple options that we're studying all across the West Seattle Link extension that are not preferred alternatives. And so I think I'll let Jason speak to this, but the design work really is advancing in that area. We are trying to bring up, however, the Avalon work up to the level of what the other alternatives are. Jason, I don't know if you want to add a little bit more here.
No, I think you said it. So, Nathan, you'll remember when we did the further studies, we presented kind of the initial results to the board, and that was what the board considered when they asked for that alternative to be added to the final EIS. So in the final EIS, it will include the alternative with the tunnel portal closer to the West Seattle Bridge.
Yeah, I mean, it is typical if something is preferred, we continue to do design work on it and look.
But if I can, sorry, Lita, but if I can reframe my question. So the board said to you, you need to investigate an option that drops Avalon Station. That's all they said, and what we imagined at the time was that the route would be exactly the way that we had seen it previously, and the portal would be up at Fauntleroy Junction, and it would just drop a station. We pictured that. You showed us something that was completely different, that was a much cheaper and better design, but had the portal at the top of Avalon Hill, Andover Hill. So clearly what the board has told you, you've got a lot of flexibility here. Our concern is for the suggestion that we have given you to be investigated further, that the board would need to select the drop Avalon station option and then tell you, consider some tweaks around that. Now, the problem is the board's not going to suggest that unless there is a clear benefit from the drop Avalon station. And there is no real benefit in terms of the station at Delridge. It's just a cost-saving measure. But if you were to investigate that lower tunnel portal, there would be many, many add-on benefits in terms of transitional resources, in terms of the lower station, just lower impact in general. The board needs to see that, and the community needs to see that.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think our challenge is there's ideas all over the corridor that folks would like us to investigate. And Jason, I know we've captured that we've gotten this feedback. We've shared it with the design team. It isn't like a simple investigation. It's quite a bit more work that kind of goes beyond, I think, what we typically do for something that is not the preferred alternative. But it is something that if the board were to tell us to investigate, that we could.
Who could we lobby for that? Like, what are our opportunities at this point?
Yeah. I mean,
we are aware that multiple members of the board have asked you to look into this.
Yeah. Yes. Let's, I think we should take this back. They've asked us, sort of questions about it, for sure. And so, Jason, maybe we could just talk more about it. I still don't know that it would be something we would be showing in the fall because we are focused on the preferred alternatives. But I know it's a question that we've gotten. And so, let's
obviously the FEIS is higher importance than the community.
I'm sorry, Kim, I don't understand your comment.
It's along the same lines. It sounds like you all are making that decision not to study the Eliminate Avalon route because if the board, unless the board said, do not study that further study route, it seems like it is a part of the preferred alternative.
The Eliminate Avalon is not part of the preferred alternative. It's a different alternative, and we are looking at it in the final EIS. I think the key question here that we're getting asked is about design refinements, and that I think is where we're just coming up against, and this is I think what Jason we were talking about, where it's quite a bit more work to look at something different, and that's when we pass this on to our design team. That's the feedback we got. So
saying that is really hurtful. That it's a lot of work. I mean, come on.
But Kim, you can say that about all the alternatives. There are 5 different alternatives, and they're only prioritizing one. Like that. Like, don't focus on that one that one secondary alternative to the absence of all the others. They're analyzing 1 to 30%, and all the rest to 10%.
All the rest will be analyzed to 10%. And I don't say it's a lot of work, like we're lazy and we don't want to do it. It's that it takes a lot of resources, and so it's resources we don't necessarily have. So I think that's the thing. And I'm just being candid with you all, and so I hear you, and Jason, I think we just need to take it back and follow it.
But so going back to Johannes' question in the chat, we have lobbied members of the board. They have put in requests for you to investigate this. I know I'm sounding like a broken record. What do you need in order to really prioritize doing that investigation? Would it need to be a vote on the board? Like, what would it need to be?
Sounds like she said money.
No, here, I'm sorry. Let me just, I think what the point is if the board were to tell us that they've got to be interested in eliminating the station. And so if they were to tell us that that is the project we want to be built, and we want you to explore it in a way that reduces and, does these things, moves the portal, that would then be what they tell us to do, and then we go into final design.
But in terms of
that
a board
direction.
vote, or in terms of individuals on the board saying, hey, I want to see this information before I make my decision?
That would be part of that board vote. I mean, that's a very clear direction that we could get from the board when we publish the final EIS. They could say, and they could get also comments from all of you about the benefits of doing this approach. And so then they would shift over to the Avalon eliminate Avalon as the preferred alternative and tell us to go ahead and incorporate those kind of refinements. It's very similar to what happened here, actually. They asked us to look at the, Del 6 alignment, but to reduce impacts like to transitional resources and to move forward with an alignment that does that. And that's how we got to our refinement, because they asked us to do that. It didn't slow us down, right? We were able to go into the next phase with it. And so that could additionally happen for this next route. And that's a very clear delineation. I mean, right now, we don't have that, so.
Gotcha, thank you.
It's a good focus for the group.
Yeah. Okay. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, Lady, can I circle back just quickly on Marilyn's question about the different impacts? And first, when we published the draft EIS, we had, as Deb and Kim noted, the community advisory group, and we had several meetings with that group in which we presented information on the draft EIS. And some of those slide decks have some pretty well organized slides and some key differentiators that we pointed out. So we can send a link to those out after the meeting. But just looking at that for Del 6, that's the Andover Street Station lower height, we identified 48 residential displacements with that alternative. And for the median tunnel alternative, so that's WSJ 5, again, we looked at these together, we identified 153. And then those are shown kind of in comparisons in those presentations to the other alternatives. So the 14 reduction would be off of that 48 Del Ridge.
In Del Ridge. Thank you.
Then, are you able to drop that in the chat? Do you happen to have that link? Or we can follow up with it.
I have a link, yeah, but I'm not sure if when we leave the chat, if they'll still have access to it.
They'll still have it. Let's just email it after. Yeah.
But I'll drop it now, and then we can follow up too.
And are you going to send this slide deck out?
Yep.
Good, because there's some easier things to see on it that I want more time with.
Yeah, sure. Well, I know we're over time, but really appreciate the conversation. As you are thinking about, things for this fall, if something comes to your mind of what would be helpful for engagement or for our next meeting, I think you know where to find Phoebe and I.
Last time we had set up a date so it didn't just get hung out there. It's the fall. This is somehow, I'm not sure how, but it's the middle of August.
Yeah, well, I think we just skipped the July meeting in June, I think.
But is this something that we'd like to look at a late September meeting? So it's like 6 weeks. Are you Sound Transit?
We have September 11th held on our calendars right now. I think like the second Monday at 4 is what we sort of held.
Would you be ready at that point to, like, in terms of your preparation for the public meetings, would you be at a point where you would have something to really discuss, or do you think we should hold that back a few weeks?
That's a great question, Nathan. Why don't we check on that, and then maybe we can adjust our day based on that.
So let's maybe hold the 11th for now, and
yeah.
we potentially could change it.
Yeah, we won't get rid of the time, but
I hope that we can meet on the 11th, even if it's just to understand where you guys are in that public, laying out the public process. And we may know of other things that are coming up that you may not know about.
Oh, yes. Actually, that was something that just generally I know, we were thinking if there's stuff going on in the fall that you all know about that's like really just avoid this, or you have ideas for West Seattle. We love we get a big crowd usually, and so we're always trying to think of venues as well.
Right.
That can be a challenge, I know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay cool.
Thank you.
It's a hot one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.